Welcome on behalf of the Nantucket Civic League. I'm Alan Reinhardt, president of the Civic League, and this event, Meet the Articles, is one of the Civic League's so-called signature events. The purpose, or the mission, I should say, of the Civic League, or part of the mission, is to encourage participation in local government. And we do this in a number of ways. All through the winter, we do forums. We have coming up in our April forum, we'll be doing a coastal erosion forum, and then in May, the end of May on the 23rd, we'll be doing a forum with seals. We also sponsor a number of other events throughout the year. Again, the idea is we're trying to engage the public, the community, in local government. Today, for Meet the Articles, we have a program where we try and highlight what we feel are some of the articles that most need explanation. This program will be taped. It'll be available on both NCTV 18 and Geno TV, Channel 99. And without further ado, let me introduce the moderator for this afternoon, Peter Morrison. And Peter will be in charge of asking the questions, sort of moderating the discussion as we go through and meet the articles. Again, thank you on behalf of the Nantucket Civic League.
I, too, would like to welcome you folks to the first of the two opportunities to get to know what's going to be up at ATM. The way I'd like to conduct this is you'll see in the blue, I've got a white version, but the blue version of the program, we've got a time allocation for the presenters, and what we'd like to do is use really only half of the time for the presenters and ask that they simply highlight give the highlights of what it is they're proposing and the rationale and the purpose, so that we can then open it up to at least half of the time for audience questions. And if you do have a question when the questions period starts, just raise your hand and we have people who will come by. Actually, you could do it at any time, raise your hand, just grab somebody and get one of the cards, you can write your question out, and then we'll be able to pass it on to the speakers. I'm going to try to enforce the time limit so that we can finish more or less on time. I have the sacred bell of Jane Lamb's that we have always used. So when you hear that as you're speaking, that means that we'd like you to wind up within maybe 15 or 20 seconds. The first block of articles that we're going to consider, I'd like to ask Andrew Vorse and Leslie Snell from the Planning Department to step up here and take the two seats over here. And they are going to cover in about 15 minutes the real estate articles and the wind turbine study and the zoning articles. And I don't know if Matt Mulcahy is here yet. If he is, could you raise your hand? I don't see him. But we have him scheduled to briefly tell us what the Finance Committee had to say about particular articles. Andrew?
Thanks, Peter. Thank you, Peter, and thanks to the Civic League for inviting us again. We are going to talk about zoning articles and real estate articles. We have a far fewer zoning articles this year than we've had in the past, so for some of you that's a happy thing. For me it's quite sad. We have 7 of those submitted by the Planning Board, and I will let you know that this just happens to be an off year. We have a lot of work to continue to complete from the 2009 master plan, so there will be more of those in the future. So if we could get started with our PowerPoint. What guides us in our work is the 2009 master plan that was unanimously voted at town meeting. We're in the 4th year of that. We have an implementation scheduled to meet, which was laid out in the plan. It is online. If any of you have not read that, it is available. So I would encourage you to review it. And this slide generally talks about some overall goals that we have to amend the zoning and some of the concepts that we've incorporated on an ongoing basis. For specifics for this year, we're continuing to phase out some of the zoning districts, RC2, RC, and LC, which are broad districts that are going to more tailored and more specific zones. We're implementing these new zones and have been doing so basically for the past 4 years. One of the overriding principles is to match the existing pattern of development to the zoning district, so you don't have mismatches where you have residences in commercial zones or vice versa. And we have the town overlay and the country overlay concepts, where the town overlay district is where development and infill is encouraged, country overlay district where it is discouraged, and the creation of village centers. So the first article, and this is by far the most complicated one, is Article 30. What this does is makes some changes to the use chart. One of the things that we are going to post, and look for this soon, is a color-coded version of the actual changes. Because the warrant is printed in black and white, it's not entirely clear, so our color version will be much clearer. But basically, what we are doing is looking at the industrial districts. You'll see that there are new uses in the industrial districts. One of the feedbacks that we've heard from people who've said, I'm interested in going to that particular zone, so from RC2 to industrial. However, it's too restrictive, and we looked and basically came up with a series of uses that would be consistent. So you can see that in our chart. The rest is fairly minor. The one new use that has generated some conversation is the medical marijuana dispensary. For those of you who have been following any of this, medical use, not recreational, medical use of marijuana has been voted in the state. It passed on Nantucket by one of the highest majorities of any towns in the Commonwealth. 76% of voters authorized its use. The Department of Health is currently working on regulations which are expected to be issued in May. So we have looked at where this particular use would be appropriate and have identified 2 districts, which are the commercial industrial district and a district called commercial neighborhood, which is the same district where the hospital is located and other health organizations are located, and we do have a map of that. This gives you an idea of how to read the chart. And basically, you'll see some of the new uses or reorganized uses. In this case, garage residential is the N stands for no, the A stands for accessory, and the Y stands for yes, which is a use by right. Some uses have been crossed out, and they've actually, in the example for greenhouse for personal use, greenhouse has been moved to other agricultural uses, so it's still allowed. It hasn't been eliminated from the chart. So if anyone has any specific questions on where we've moved uses, certainly please let us know. The map before you shows where the commercial neighborhood and commercial industrial zones are. You can see the area on the left, upper left-hand side is where the hospital is located. And the green is the 1,000 feet from schools right now, which is superimposed. And again, until some of the regulations are clear, we don't know how that will interface. Article 31 regards formula businesses. On Nantucket, we have a formula business exclusion district, so it's not the entire island, but it's a clear area of the downtown. We were one of the first communities to pass this in Massachusetts. We modeled it on other existing bylaws that were in California and mainly Washington. Other communities, especially on the Cape, have gone on to pass similar bylaws. And we did a review of those and determined that ours might be tightened up from our original version. So we've made some changes where we've reduced the number of other businesses that are located worldwide from 14 to 10, which is consistent with what has been passed by the Attorney General, and added some additional standards which emphasized that these features must be visible from the exterior, which again, the Attorney General has cautioned communities that if you don't have that type of language, your bylaw is subject to being overturned. The issue for formula businesses is that there is in the Commerce Clause, there's a prohibition against differentiating the type of businesses. So our formula business district, or formula business restrictions put limitations on formula businesses and provide a way of discouraging them, but no community can completely outlaw them. We do think this strengthens our bylaw, and I think at a critical time when there may be changes in the downtown area. I'm going to turn this one over to Leslie, who worked with the Brant Point Area Planning Group.
All right, Article 32 rezones several portions of Brant Point. A lot of the districts in the Brant Point area were identified in the master plan in 2009 to be phased out. So in working with that group, they identified some other districts that would be suitable for their area. The planning board did make some modifications to the warrant article as originally drafted due to some property owner concerns. So they have recommended that the zoning changes from limited commercial to residential 5 move forward, and the properties included in that portion of this rezoning are all residential properties. So that would match the residential zoning district with the existing residential use. And then the board eliminated 2 sections of the article. One pertained to a property on Holbert Avenue, and the other included the Beachside Hotel. And those property owners expressed some concerns, but said they would be willing to work with the board at a future rezoning.
The next article is Article 33. This changes a single property from its current RC2 status to commercial neighborhood to match the properties across the street in green. So this is going from commercial to commercial. And again, this keeps a consistency of commercial properties fronting on Old South Road. Article 34 is a proposal which changes certain properties from the country overlay district to the town overlay district. This does not change the underlying zoning. It is an overlay district which matches these particular properties to their more similar properties, in this case, the properties located in green. The main driver for this is that the existing zoning districts are consistent with the town overlay district, not the country, and there's been sewer extensions and other changes that make these properties more consistent with their town neighbors as opposed to country. Article 35 is deals with 4 properties on Meadow Lane that are in the R20 district. All 4 of these are non-conforming to the zoning. The R10 makes them conforming to the zoning. And part of the introduction of the new zoning districts in this area is to eventually phase out the R1 district, which is the red area that you see, to make all of the area more consistent with its existing development pattern. Article 36 was a proposal to look at height restrictions in this particular subdivision off of Hummock Pond Road. During the process, we discovered there was some miscommunication about the underlying zoning and the height district. So we have recommended no action on this article and may look at other non-zoning ways to control height, including through HDC regulations. Article 37 is the result of ongoing discussions about rezoning other RC2 neighborhoods, and it changes RC2, I should say, and existing village residential neighborhoods. The first one, the village residential, the changes to the setbacks, we found that the Setbacks that we had imposed created quite a bit of nonconformities and hardship for the property owners. So the VR proposal is to match, again, the setbacks to the existing conditions on those properties. It was leading to a lot of trips to the Zoning Board of Appeals, which were essentially unnecessary. In the VTEC district, we found that the existing ground cover was too restrictive, which made people resist any sort of attempt to change that particular zoning. The existing ground cover would still be a reduction, but just not as drastic for the properties that might be included. Article 38 is a citizen article in Sconset. It changes zoning for the properties outlined in red to the Sconset Residential 10 District. This was proposed originally last year, but due to a notification error, these properties had to be left out. The property owners have asked that they be considered for inclusion again, and the Planning Board has given this a positive recommendation. Article 39 was a citizen article that proposed to amend the definition of frontage averaging, which would have removed the ability to do this in the country district. Planning Board recommended against this because it found that it was actually entirely contrary to the whole intent of frontage averaging. By removing it, you would actually encourage the creation of subdivisions where if you did frontage averaging, you wouldn't need to introduce new roadways. So it was somewhat odd that it was proposed, and it has a negative recommendation. Article 40 was a citizen article that proposed changing or allowing existing co-op property ownership to switch to condominiums. There are very few of these. I guess the most significant one is Nashawquisset and properties on Daffodil Lane. I think in other areas of the country where co-op ownership is more common, banks and other lenders have less of a resistance to lend on those types of properties, and the property owners are finding that cooperative ownership is creating problems for them. It doesn't make any changes to density. It does allow them to switch from co-op to condominium only. And it's for existing properties. It wouldn't be for any new properties, which I don't see those being created. We have heard some rumors that this has something to do with Sherburne Commons. It does not. Sherburne Commons is not cooperative ownership, and it has nothing to do with that property. Finally, Article 41, which essentially was a moratorium article submitted by a citizen, was found early on to be improperly drafted and illegal. It attempted to outlaw new windmills or wind energy systems, not only on Nantucket, but in state and federal waters, which again is beyond the control of town meeting. We did speak with him, and the Planning Board agreed that some sort of referral of this matter for further study would be appropriate, and that's what the motion that the Finance Committee eventually agreed to. And that is proceeding, but a moratorium, basically, an open-ended moratorium is essentially contrary to the laws of Massachusetts, and the original article as submitted was not salvageable. So that's the end of the zoning articles. Oh, okay. You didn't have the sewer articles. I thought I'd make a quick comment on them, which are Article 42, and the maps are available online, and in addition to the sewer report that was done. So this gives you a quick idea of the town or the Surfside wastewater treatment properties. Next slide shows you the properties in Sconset that will be added to the sewer district. Next, Article 60 is a home rule petition which would allow the transfer of this property outlined in red from the county to the town or to the land bank. This is protected open space, so nothing about its status would change. There is some specific reservations of the existing roadways that traverse through the property, and assurances that this will continue to be used for public access and beach purposes that are written in the article. Article 74, you may have read about this, is property at the corner of Bartlett Road and Surfside Road. It's important before this property is built out, it has been offered for sale, and it has significant development potential. Before this happens, we're proposing at least to purchase a portion of it, and the next slide shows that, so that future intersection improvements can occur. The motion on this article is positive with the amount of $275,000 authorized. As for the balance of the land, we're still looking and having discussions about how others may participate in that, whether the property is just released from the sale or whether it becomes something else still is under discussion. Article 75 deals with property located in the industrial area. It authorizes the selectmen to lease up to 5 acres for very specific purposes regarding energy. One of the long-term goals of actually creating the industrial area from the beginning was to find a way to move the tank farm away from the waterfront area. So in the event that discussions are I guess, fruitful between the Board of Selectmen, there's a hope that there may be a way to relocate that facility here. The authorization doesn't force anything to happen, but it does authorize the Selectmen to act if they reach agreement on appropriate conditions. One of the part of the motion, which was talked about by both FinCom and Selectmen members, is that there will be a release of a study on bulk fuel needs before that would happen. And one more slide. This gives you a general area of where this is located. If you haven't been in this area, you'll see that there is quite a change of industrial uses, again, being moved out of their current locations to a much better location out away from residential neighborhoods and other sites. Article 79 is a cleanup article regarding 4 streets that I think most people feel are already public. There hasn't been a proper taking and layout of these streets. This article will basically follow up on action that the Board of Selectmen are expected to take at a public hearing on the 27th. So if the Selectmen vote to lay these streets out, town meeting will need to authorize that these all become public ways. And finally, Article 80 deals with paper streets and random parcels that are located throughout the island. There's 5 separate maps that show different areas. On this, go back one, sorry. Parcels are outlined in red and paper streets are outlined in purple. Here we are at Matticat, and the areas out of the western part are some random leftover parcels that would be dedicated to open space. And the same with some of the other red parcels that are located closer in. The paper streets would be available as yard sale type conveyances to abutters. Next slide shows an area in Brant Point that was discussed through their area plan process, and 3 paper streets in Monomoy that again were citizen requests to eliminate these streets. Next, in Cisco, again, there's substantially lower density here, and these particular streets really just serve their immediate abutters. There's really no need to maintain them. These would be available through yard sale dispositions. There's one parcel here located off of Surfside Road that could be merged with other properties that are being developed by Habitat for Humanity. And the small area in Matacasham would be available for disposition. Hinsdale Road is the other parcel here, which would be, actually that map shows it in the wrong location, which we'll have to fix, where that could be purchased for open space and either kept by the town or deeded to the land bank. And there's a small parcel here in Tom Nevers, which has an earlier vote and necessary for us to perfect title, so that could be also conveyed. So that ends our zoning and real estate articles.
As always, Andrew and Leslie, I congratulate you on covering a lot of ground in a short period of time. And at this point, I'd just like to pause for a moment and ask for a show of hands, who has questions that they want to ask about any of these articles at this point? Okay. Let me start. What I'd like to do is, Tim Savarino is here on behalf of the Finance Committee. I'd like to ask, do you have anything that you want to say at this point, or do you want to simply be available to respond to questions, Tim?
Well, Peter, it's a pleasure to be with everyone today, and it's nice to see a fellow Finance Committee member over there in the moderator's seat. It's good to be with you. I wouldn't add anything. Andrew and Leslie did a wonderful job covering it. Everything. The Finance Committee, as you know, is charged by state law and town bylaw, making an independent recommendation for town meeting. And all the articles that were just covered, as far as zoning and real estate, the Finance Committee was pleased to support what Andrew has presented to you today. Also, I would say thank you, Andrew. We're very grateful as a Finance Committee. We did have some comments on Article 75, and we appreciate you crafting them into the motion. So if there are any questions, I'm here to answer.
Okay, if I may have the written questions, please. Thank you, Alan. Okay. This question pertains to Article 78. It says, describe the tower, the size, etc. Comment on the need for tower and the revenue that the town would receive. Does that make sense? 78?
It does. It's not an article that I've covered here today, though. It's really an article through town administration, and I'm afraid I'm not able to answer those questions.
The question here is requesting an example of formula business to further explain how it works. Can you do that?
Yep. A formula business is, I guess the simplest way is to describe it as a chain business. So in order for a formula business to be essentially flagged by our bylaw, it has to have more than 10 other locations worldwide. It has to have certain identical characteristics. It either uses the same type of sign, it uses the same type of markings on products or inventory. It has to use similar type uniforms, so all the employees would have the same uniforms. It has to have a trademark where all the merchandise has a certain, you recognize it as like a Gap piece of clothing, or it all comes from the same merchandiser. So it's most commonly described as a chain store. And in our revision, or in the current bylaw, you have to meet 3 of these characteristics, and we are changing that so you would meet 2. So.
I see another question about to be delivered. Two questions. Okay, all right. What if not external signs are appropriate? Could we have some clarification? I'm trying to make this into.
I was trying to expand on it to make sure that I understood. For example, this is on the formula business. If a guy just had shingles outside his store and no signs of any kind, are there still ways that it would be picked up? I mean, I'm thinking of, I'm being a little extreme, to pick up like a McDonald's or an obvious chain where they conform to all our architectural or sign attributes, does that get them out of the formula restrictions?
Right. What we're trying to do is make it a little bit stronger. So, for example, if you had a menu that could be seen from the outside, that would now count under the bylaw where it doesn't now. If there were certain interior signs that were visible from the outside, those would count where they might not now. So where you might use a logo or a common color scheme, those would be flagged now where they're not. So those, I hope that answers the question, but you know, if you know, it depends, and we probably should post the Attorney General. I know you've read it, Mr. Afton, and you know that they were quite specific about, for example, I think they used a Subway where, you know, if a Subway store came and conformed and changed everything, that we in fact would have to allow them. So the changes that we're making to the bylaw, I think, strengthen it. And again, it has to pass muster with the Attorney General, but I think it anticipates some additional scenarios that we didn't think about in the first round.